Hello, Sam Rehan. Is that how you pronounce your name?
Yeah, it's Rehan, and
Rehan.
Sam comes from Samia, but
Mm,
it's not written the way you think it was written. But
mm,
Sam is wonderful, and Rehan, yes.
Rehan. And where's that from? Where's your name from
Oh
then?
no, thank you for asking. So mixed heritage, born in the UK, but heritage Indian,
Hmm.
Pakistani, and Afghanistani. So
Oh,
Arabic
wow.
name.
Wow. So
Yeah.
that's an Arabic, historically Arabic name.
Yes.
Wow. So one of your parents English or both?
Both Indian, Indian and Pakistani. So a father from Agra in India. I
Mm,
always say next door to the Taj Mahal. I've
nice.
never been.
You need to go then, don't you?
Yeah, have you been, Leslie?
I haven't been, but I do want to go.
Yes, it will happen at some point.
Mm,
Love to take the children. A
mm,
mum from Pakistan and great grandparents from Afghanistan. So I was born in the UK,
mm.
and they were immigrants, so they came across in the 60s and early 70s.
Mm,
So
mm. So
yeah.
first generation fully born and bred here.
Yes, correct.
Mm,
Yes.
mm.
So
How
I've
do
got
you
a bit of a
find
northern
that?
accent.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's interesting because the kids have got Sussex accents.
Mm,
So they were both born in London, but brought up in East Sussex, West Sussex. Yeah, it's interesting because normally when people say, "Where are you from?" I think, do you mean the accent? Do you
yeah.
mean the looks?
Yeah. Do you mean the name?
What is it? What is it? And occasionally, Leslie, I get tapped on the shoulder because people think they start speaking to me in Spanish, thinking I'm Latin American.
Yeah.
And I think that's because my mum was very pale and
Mm,
my father was very dark. So I've kind of taken in between tones. So it's
mm.
always a conversation starter, which I love,
I
which I really
really
love.
like to understand people's kind of like evolutionary journey, because we carry that in our genes, don't we, in our DNA. And yeah, it's our heritage. It's so important. It is like what we're living today is part of our historical path. And I find that really fascinating to see how that historical path impacts on our perspective today and how the choices that we make.
Yes. And I so hear you. And I think that's where my love of travel came up. Luckily, I was doing a great job and it allowed me to teach in over 30 countries. And, I think with what you're saying, the main thing for me is that we're more similar than
Mm.
dissimilar.
Yes, we are. Yeah, we all have that thread, don't we, going through us of
Mm,
thousands of years of our
mm,
ancestors, and they've all traveled and, you know, wended their way to wherever we happen to
yeah,
be at this very moment. So
yeah,
no, I find that really fascinating.
yeah,
A subject for another day,
yeah.
probably. It's a whole podcast on its own, isn't it? But you're a well-being professional, but I have come into contact with you in the context of laughter therapy. And I just thought it'd be really interesting because I hadn't heard of laughter therapy, which is why I said it'd be really good if I could have a chat with you. One, to understand your journey into therapy,
Hmm.
and then your journey into laughter therapy. So how
Thank
did that
you.
tell us about how that all happened?
Yeah, thank you. Really great question. So for me, my background's in science. So I actually did a science degree. I did something called biotechnology, um, almost like biomedical engineering sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually worked as a scientist at a company in Oxford for 5 years. Loved it. So we were growing up yeast cells, animal cells, fermentation, DNA, all those sorts of things. Loved it,
Wow.
loved it, loved it. Yeah, I've always loved science. And back in 2005 in London, I actually fell outside a shop. Luckily, it was okay, but I hurt a coccyx at the bottom of my spine. And I remember how painful. So I was in my early 30s then. And oh, that's the quails. Quails
There they
there.
are.
Thank you, quails. And, and I just remember at the time how it was really painful, but really thinking I was quite fit and healthy before I had children, thinking, gosh, thank goodness kind of happened to me because, I'm okay. I haven't broken anything. But going to the doctors, they said to me that you really can't do anything about the coccyx. It has to heal. However, a friend of mine who plays the violin said to me, have some cranial psychotherapy.
Mm.
Cranial what? And off I went to a student clinic, I think it was in Islington, and there was a wonderful practitioner there, an osteopath. and two students. It was like a student clinic. And they did this cranial psychotherapy, which kind of comes from osteopathy. It's got its roots there. And they weren't moving their hands, but I could feel the heat. I could feel things moving in me. And my brain could make sense of it, Lesley, because I was thinking, hold on a minute, I do science. And if they're not manipulating or massaging, what's going on? So off I went, did a weekend course, and it opened my eyes so much. I did a practitioner course. Then the awareness through the training that what we have in us, and often it can be referred to as the breath of life. We've got this other rhythm. And there are different ways of accessing this rhythm and this health in us, whether it's acupuncture, Reiki, cranial, hands-on healing. But cranial is rooted in science. So going back to your question, that was 2005. I qualified in 2008. So one foot in the corporate world as a trainer, as a corporate trainer, and the other foot of supporting people's health. And the cranial, what it does is, in a very simpler term, is we tune into the fluids of the body. And depending on where you are with your health, we can follow this rhythm. So very, very simplistic terms, generalization. For example, it could be that on a normal day, on a good health day, your rhythm is like this. However, you had a fall, you've got a migraine, you've got some sort of emotional issue, perhaps suddenly it's doing this. There's another rhythm there, and the rhythm's changed, and I can tune into that. And when I first came across it, Lesley, I was thinking, how am I going to do anything like that? And I remember, as part of the exam, the osteopath who had been doing this for 30 years, who was an osteopath for 30 years, had me with my hands on a client on the table. And he said to me, I've tuned into this client. I put my hands on, his hands on. Now you put your hands on, and I'm going to put my hands, this is the osteopath, on your hand, and you tell me what you can feel. And do you know what? We were both said it all matched up.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And then going to your second question about laughter. So that started my journey with working with people. And I've always had an interest in well-being from a very young age. It came from my father having mental health issues as a child, just actually thinking that every family's like this. And until I went to London at age 18, going, actually, no. And and coming from somebody from up north, a very different down south, needing skill sets I didn't really grow up with and needing support, I found those resources. And then laughter, back in 2015, an incredibly difficult week where my sister rang to say my nephew, age 10, passed away, misadventure. It was eventually ruled in hospital. Loss of my job through redundancy. However, because I was a single mom, I was so reliant on this one job. My son was having blood transfusions every week. The same week my son fell and had mouth concussion, head concussion. I was living in temporary accommodation, and there was a number of other things there as well. And to cut a long story short, I remember putting the kids to bed. They were 5 and 7, thinking I need to keep myself physically, emotionally, and mentally well, because right now I'm just going to kind of fall down. And I've got these 2 children, beautiful children, that really rely on me. And I just remember it was really early. They went to bed early, and I was just thinking, it was about 8, 9 o'clock, thinking, I tried to watch some comedy, but the deciphering the humor didn't do it for me. And then something led me to watching YouTube, watching videos of babies 4 or 5 months on, gurgling, laughing. You know when parents are doing something, the babies are making these sounds, and the parents keep doing it. And I just remember Lesley softening, thinking, do you know, however I'm feeling right now, I just feel a little bit better, a small amount better. And I carried on watching a few more videos, and then remembering kind of, I don't know if it was the same day of going to bed, but the next couple of days looking at the research and with the science background, realizing, goodness me, 5 decades of research into laughter and humor and smiling And there's medical associations that use laughter to use it in a medical settings. There's laughter therapists being employed in hospices, in cancer clinics. There's so much research. It blew my mind, absolutely did. And it, you know when something happens and there's I always say there's something good, great, and goodness, great, and beautiful, good. And as a result of the loss of the job through what ended up happening is I ended up becoming a laughter therapist, laughter yoga teacher. And I just have a look back, and for me, what is amazing is, I've worked with people with severe disabilities, and I'm talking about brain damage, people who can't speak, autistic teenagers, foster families, seniors, many people from different walks and backgrounds. And I remember one lady, Lesley, who had an accident, and she said to me, we did a session, and she said to me afterwards, I think just towards the end, she said to me, Sam, I understand what you're doing, but she said the one exercise where I could feel it, I felt I was laughing, but I couldn't feel it, but you did something. And it wasn't my technique. It comes from a doctor, Dr. Katari in India, who is a heart doctor. She said, when you asked us to kind of cross over and go, ha, 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 I could feel my laughter. And normally when I'm laughing with other people, because of the changes in the brain, because of the brain damage, when I do that, so I'm going to, when I'm laughing with my friends and family, I'm going to say, hold on a minute, I'm going to do this, because I think what was happening, I was laughing up here, but this is allowing me to connect to my laughter.
How wonderful. So how do you generally find your clients then? How do they generally come to you?
Thank you. So I think part of it is where when you've got team building, and I love team building, and they're going, hold on a minute, what can we do different? And they're going,
yeah,
gosh, Sam does something called laughter. Yeah. And I think once you put people's minds at ease to say, I'm not going to enforce laughter, I'm going to generate, and they're going, what, you're going to tell jokes? No.
no.
And when we go back to the session we did,
yeah.
there's no joke telling. Yes, there was humor, and it's to do with bringing people together where we do playful exercises. If you want to. And I always have chairs at the side, they can leave. So they find me that way. So I'm very much about communities and charities and workplaces.
I was going to say, in the where I came to you, it was within a community group of people, and yeah, there's no joke telling or anything. It is just a communal kind of happiness that kind of comes over you as you start to do some of these various exercises, and then you just get into a rhythm with it, don't you?
Yes.
Yeah.
And adding to that, the research has shown that when we are in company, in groups, we're 30 times more likely to laugh. So that's wonderful. But then there's a second
it's contagious, isn't it?
Hugely contagious. And I think when you're feeling safe and supported and not judged, and the whole thing is that we're laughing together, we're not laughing at somebody. And that leads me to the second point, where nearly every session I've done, pretty much so, because I always try and make myself available, because there's things that people want to share privately. And unfortunately, a number of people, what they've shared with me is that life experiences, trauma, abuse, where somebody, unfortunately, terribly, sadly, but has laughed at them, perhaps through when they've been abused. And their laughter, their smiles is tinged with painful memories. That's one aspect. The other part of it is where social anxiety. Do you know, there's people, so many people have rung me and emailed me and texted me and said to me, I know you're doing laughter in the village, or you're doing laughter online, but I can't do it in public, because for me it's a bit like singing, and it's a number of things. And what I've done is one-to-one, where I'm using laughter as a vehicle to increase their confidence and self-esteem. Because when we're laughing, we are more authentic, we are in our natural state. But for some of us, that natural state of how they are has been affected by a number of things.
in a society. I mean, people are horrible to people, aren't they?
We are one of my quotes is life is brutal and it can be beautiful.
Mm.
And this lady, I was in a wonderful setting, and the average age I think was about 85. And going back to what you said, this lovely lady stood and she goes, "Can I share something with everybody?" I said, "Sure." I think she was 93, 95, and she goes, "Please laugh as much as you want, please keep laughing." And she says, "Can I share my story?" And she said when she was 5 years old, she was Afro-Caribbean. She said when she was 5 years old, her father slapped her across the face for laughing out loud. He goes, "We don't laugh out loud in our community." But she said that she made a promise that when she's older, she's going to laugh as much as she wants, because I've got children, grandchildren, great grandchildren. And I think she had one great grandchild. And she goes, "I laugh so much because, well, whatever was going on for my father, and she thinks that's where he came from, maybe something happened to him. She made a vow." And with what you've just said, we're not easy. We're not easy as a species. Most of us are doing our best. And I think for me, laughter is a resource that most of us can access.
Yeah, I think we're all doing our best to cope, no matter what that outcome looks like in the wider world. We're all doing our best, aren't we? Just sometimes our best doesn't look that great because maybe genetically, as we were saying right at the beginning, through your DNA, you've been given some of that breeding, upbringing. I don't know what the correct term is.
Culture
exactly. That you're carrying.
Yes.
And you pay it forward.
Yes.
And it's not good.
No, it's not good. And I know myself, I mean, laughter starts with smiling. I know for a fact, which I'm only aware in the last couple of years, that I spent a lot of my 20s smiling, but it was an authentic smile because I saw my mum do that. Because of the mental health of my father. I mean, he could be incredibly happy, and next minute he was the opposite. So my mum smiled a lot when my father wasn't there. Yes, my father and my parents did smile, but it was almost like, is it okay to smile now? And I remember being told off. I remember my father saying, "Sit down and be quiet and start smiling and laughing." And when those things happen at a very young age, they form beliefs. And I think when I explain about people, there's little nods, and afterwards people come saying, "I'm so happy you said that because that happened to me," or something similar, or mentioned it to my spouse and they said that. And then there's a chapter in my book right at the back where I talk about support, because there's a condition where I think there was a Swedish study, and they're saying possibly, I think as much as 15% of the society, where if say me and you are laughing, Lesley, we're laughing, and somebody walks past the window or hears us, they think we're laughing at them. There's actually a particular condition. So in this study, they were saying that this person that they were working with, scientific study, they could only get a seat at the back of the bus. If they sat near at the front and they heard people laughing, they'd have to get off the bus. They'd have to sit at the back. So mindful of that, there's a number of groups that do laughter, but I bring in that support, mindful that laughter isn't easy for everybody.
No, I think it's conscious, isn't it? It's being conscious that just because I think that you were saying about sayings, but it's that thing about we're all looking at the horizon, just our horizons are in a different place, and it's like we're all in a boat. It's just some of us are in different boats, aren't we? And I think if you're kind and conscious and awaken to the world and the wider context, then you can be more considerate of that. You said on Sunday when we were together about being generous with your smile. Smile at people. You don't have to, not laughing, because as you just said, that can be very triggering for some people, but smiling generously in your day. You never know when someone might pick that up later on in their day and use that as an anchor effectively for their own well-being. I think that was a beautiful thing.
Yeah, thank you. Absolutely. And a number of people have shared, and what I shared on the session with yourself was about this lady who a stranger smiled and she kind of was a bit taken aback. She wasn't in a great space, but 5, 6, 7 hours later, she was at home on her own. She'd lost her husband recently, and she just sat there thinking about the day that had happened and remembering that smile. And the memory of that smile from a stranger brought a smile to her, and she basked in that smile. And she felt wonderful. I mean, I'm shivering saying that to you. She felt so wonderful that she shared that with me, saying, please tell people to share their smiles. And I've had a number of people say to me, well, I don't really smile at people because people go, you know, they don't do anything. And it's that thing about, we can pass something. It's like yourself, Leslie, you can pass some information. It may be received, but landing, it may land later.
You
and
should,
our job,
it is that giving generously, isn't it? And without expectation of thanks.
Yes.
I think that's really hard. That's a really hard thing, isn't it? To give without the expectation of someone saying thank you.
Yes.
You just give.
Yes.
And then that's enough.
Yes. And you are right, it's hard, because when we go back to thousands of years as humans, which is very social, until very recently, it was bartering. You know, if you give me a bit of food, I'll share like a bit of wool with you. So that bartering, the exchange, it kept us alive.
It's that transactional society, isn't it?
Yeah, and if we didn't, then they would be, hold on a minute, why she or he, or why is that person giving something? What do they want?
What do they want?
What do they want?
What do they want
Yeah,
from me?
yeah, and that's a really good point that you're bringing up, Lesley, because it is hardwired. We are skeptical if somebody gives something for free. It's like, oh, they'll be asking for something later. However, as we move into more positive energy, I think what the word you use is pay forward. It's paying forward. And even recently, when I've given people lifts and done some, they said, are you sure? And I said, when I've used the word pay forward, they've understood that.
Yeah, that's a context now that we've become aware of, isn't it? The paying forward kind of culture. And I think, you know, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, isn't it? It just comes back to, it's like when you are at a certain point, you can give without needing to receive. But because it's such a small element of society, we don't trust. Trust is very difficult for us. And hopefully we're working towards the second age of enlightenment, and people will become more trusting and be okay to be more trusting.
Yes, and trust is earned. And it's okay to say, I'm not sure about this. And I think if you can create a safe space in whatever you do, and just be authentic, just stop and pause and say, how is it for you? What do you need right now? And just one other point I guess I wanted to say is, when people say to me, and when I share with them that I can't always smile, they go, really? And I say, yes, because you don't have things going on, we all have things. And I say, well, okay, one technique to be able to access more smiles and laughter when it's difficult is movement. So, you know, we talked about swaying and, you know, stroking your arms, putting a song on, because often when we are finding things difficult, perhaps we are in our heads, and if we can get into the body, the embodiment. And there's another way, it's through art, the wonderful, you know, your group, the art, music, movement, you know. And I've worked with people with a lot of disabilities, and I had one lady in a hospice who was in an incredible amount of pain towards the end, and she said, I can move my tongue, and she was going, moving the tongue that way, and she was smiling. Just smiling. And for me, it was absolutely, and you know what, I'm just going to say one more thing, which is one of the things as a therapist is, I always say to somebody when they say, oh, Sam, I've got a really bad knee, or you know, my throat, or whatever it is, I just say, okay, what feels strong in your body? And they go like that. And I said, there's always health. And the reason I mentioned that is, when I spoke to that particular lady, and it was quite a few years ago, when I spoke to that particular lady, and I said to her, where is their health? And she was riddled with pain. You know, I think it was bone cancer. It was incredibly difficult for her. And she paused and she stopped and she said, I've got a very strong tongue. And she smiled. So we worked with the tongue. We were doing things. So yeah, absolutely.
You can always find positive, but as you say, I mean, what is really important also is to be, just going back to the thing you said previously, is to just be very empathetic to the fact that sometimes people find it hard to access that joy, and to just hold the space for them for a little while they come to whether they want to find that joy right in that moment, or whether they're just happy to just be in company.
Yes.
And just to have a quiet moment. But yeah, I found especially the self-hug,
yes,
after COVID, I found that was a really good technique. And you know, it's not a very loud out there, and you know, now we're hugging each other again. You know, you realize the power of all the chemicals that are released when you touch someone. So you know, to do that yourself, you're releasing the chemicals into your body, the happy chemicals, and get moving. We were designed to move.
With absolutely. And again, it's like, you know, if it's not the body, you can do your hands, the eyes, a bit of the head, whatever you can. You know, if we've all got different starting points, do that and ask for help. And I think it's that thing about
reach out.
You know, reach out, say to somebody, I want more laughter, I want more smiles. Let people know. Reach out to the friends who are more positive and just say, help me, you know, help. And if they can't help, perhaps somebody else can. And it's a form of resource. But yeah, laughter for me on that list of things, smiling, laughing.
Do you use it with your children? Do you use it with your children, like when they're in a tricky situation?
Yeah, I have to say sometimes, because they're teenagers, they do go, oh, mom, you know, let it go. And, you know, until recently, oh, mom, you're being cringy. You're being cringy. But no, they do like it. And they're very quick to notice, actually, when they go, are you all right, mom? And often it's when I've got things in my head. When I'm multitasking, I'm thinking, do I need to multitask right now? The 3 things I'm doing, I'm sure there's 2 things that I don't need to do right now. So it's checking in. But
I think that's interesting, getting in your head, like you said. Sometimes we just get too much in our own head, don't we? My children will say to me, they'll ask me a question. I'm surprised if the one behind me doesn't pop up over the chair in a minute. They'll ask me a question, they'll go, can we have the short answer, please? Because I'm like you, I've always got a scientific and very thorough answer ready.
Yes.
For all issues.
Yeah. I think what they like, and I think what they like is, I think when you laugh more, you end up being more playful.
Yeah.
You know, and I think when you're doing it authentically, they enjoy that. And up till now, I didn't really have any pets. I didn't grow up with pets, and through lockdown, rabbits, guinea pigs, looking after somebody's quails, hens, ducks, and everything, and it's made me more playful, which I love.
Well, we do have the Ted here. Look,
oh,
there he is.
Hello.
There's the Ted. He's never far
away.
Look at
his beautiful eyes.
Yeah, he's never far away. He nearly came at the weekend. But I'm very respectful of the fact that even though he's tiny and fluffy, some people still find that scary. So, you know, you have to be, when you're doing something in a group context, you always have to be mindful of how other people, you know, just because to me he seems small and fluffy, he might not appear that way to someone else if they've had
and again,
bad
it's
experience.
absolutely. And the thing for me is laughter. It's presence. So as I find, as I'm laughing even more, and it's like a muscle, like the more the exercise, the laughter, the more easier it is, and more present. And it's finding things, and it's easier when you're with people. And if I'm not, then I end up watching some comedy, something that makes me laugh. And I might not be laughing out loud, I'm laughing in woods.
But do you have a favorite comedian?
I don't. I think, you know, the northern one. Oh, what's his name? Peter, up from Bolton.
Peter Kay.
Yeah, he's northern humour. Yeah, I spent 18 years up north, so for me, I get his humour, his references.
I like Michael McIntyre. I have to say.
He's lovely. I
do find him very. I know he's very animated, and I quite like that. And he does all the funny accents as well, which I also find very, very amusing. No, I like. Well, you know, I grew up in the era of On the Buses, which is not very politically correct, but very, very funny.
Very funny.
As long as you take it with the fact that it's not real.
It was.
You have to find your thing, don't you? Your go-to thing, your decompression, the thing that helps you instantly access that decompression when you're feeling a bit on the edge. But thank you so much, Sam. It's been really, really fascinating. Love to hear the quails in the background as well. That was really lovely.
Thank you. It's been a huge pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And if people want to contact you, how would they go about that?
Wonderful. So my website, samrehan.com. Sam, followed by Rehan, REHAN for November.com, samrehan.com. Reach
Perfect.
out. We'd love to have a chat.
Yeah,
Thank
brilliant.
you.
Thank you so much. And I look forward to working with you again at some point in the future.
Yay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.